Hello, dear listener. Welcome back to the studio. Hope you had a lovely summer. It passed in an instant, but it's lovely to be back once again in the Spirit Dance studio. I'm Ian Jindal. I run internet retailing. But more importantly, my guest today is Alec Mills. Alec, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, I think you should introduce yourself, not because I'm lazy, but because I'm just interested in how you sum up what you do in a couple of sentences. Alec, tell us about Dame.
Well, Dame makes sustainable and toxin-free period products. We launched in 2019 in response to some findings from a previous business that we ran, which effectively pointed very clearly to the fact that traditional period products are full of toxins, they are full of plastics, and they're sold with the language of shame. So one of the moments I had was in a supermarket, and I picked up a pack of, let's call them a major brand, and on the side of the packet it advertised how the tampons, the wrappers opened silently, and I thought,
Wow.
there is no way that I want my daughters to grow up using products by a brand that talks about them and the way they feel about their bodies in this way. So in 2019, my co-founder and I launched Dame out of our previous business, and with the world's first reusable tampon applicator. And it's sort of been an evolving journey from there. But ultimately, we make a full range of toxin-free and sustainable period products. Yeah.
Right. So I'm just going to let our listener have a think, put on the kettle, because there's so much there to unpack, which we're going to try and get through. So with your help, we'll cover off everything from the sustainability. I love the shame point. I'm wondering why biscuit, crisp and sweet manufacturers haven't also adopted the silent opening. Last time I was in the cinema, they definitely hadn't. But also about your previous business and how you moved towards this. So let's go back to the motivation first off, because wandering through a supermarket, there are many things that can annoy a modern human, from food waste to capitalism to sustainable agriculture. So
Item in bagging area.
Item in bagging here, exactly. Why did this particularly motivate you to say, do you know what? I'm going to dedicate the next decade of my life to, transforming the way that period products are made, marketed, and used. That's quite a sort of a Pauline moment in your aisle number 12.
First of all, you never think it's going to be 10 years, right?
But how many has it been so far? It's a good 5.
Yeah, no, I've been a tampon salesman for a decade. I celebrated that this year.
Right, so that's 10 years then.
Yeah, burst out the cake. And you think you go into this and you think, it's going to grow very quickly, and then I'm going to sell, and then I'm going to go on to the next thing. But it's never that way. Things evolve out of ideas, and what you think is an idea or a solution turns out that it's not, and you discover real problems. And that was the case with us. And the sort of founding story from our previous business, Sanitary Hour, was that I was sat next to my business partner, who was then a friend, at dinner, and she had just had a baby, and I was asking her very sort of dull questions about being a new mother to a newborn. And she said that she had to strap her baby to her chest and run out into the pouring rain to go and buy her tampons because she had forgotten them that morning. And I'd just seen the latest, or the video for Dollar Shave Club, I think earlier that week. And I said to her, why aren't these things delivered on subscription like you can get razors? And she said, if there was a service like this, I could. So we set out thinking that the problem that was a big problem was the fact that people forget their period products. And we grew that business, but it was sluggish because ultimately that wasn't really a problem. You can get period products everywhere. It just happened to be a problem for her at that moment. There wasn't a business in it.
Yeah.
But like a lot of kind of founding stories, there's a pivot involved, and we use that experience to discover. I mean, literally packing tampons and pads in my flat in London all day long in order to bring these products to people. And at the end of the day, we'd just be in a sea of plastic, and her newborn baby would be crawling around in a sea of plastic. We just thought, God, imagine what this is like on a global scale every single day. And so we looked into it, and there's 1.3 million plastic applicators flushed down UK loos every morning. There's over 3,000 different chemicals found in period products. And we realized that there was a much more exciting opportunity here, which was, can we change an industry? Can we create products? Can we change a conversation? Can we make people, when they have their first period, not be shameful about it or feel shame from it? Can we make people who have a very bad cramps in the office and they need to speak to their boss about how to get time off? How can we change that conversation? How does this essential bodily function, how it impacts all of our lives, men and women, in such a fundamental way? How can we make all of that better?
And again, there's quite a scope creep here. So 1 minute, if I was summarising your story, I'd say, a couple of friends sitting at dinner and they extend a business model. Feels very sort of MBA 101. But 2 minutes later, you've become much more impassioned. We're talking about everything, again, from a woman's right to have a conversation at work about her period, plastic, the environmental impact, etc. So you've gone from, if you like, extending a business model to having a full-on massive number of commitments that you're bringing on to try and change in one go. I mean, that again is quite a shift.
It's probably a good time to address the elephant in the room here, that I am a guy. I've never had a period. I will never have a period. The closest thing I've ever got to is seeing my wife change her tampon and looking at diagrams very closely. So I
hopefully not on the tube.
Yeah. So when we were first looking, I got into the problem of how do you fit 20 tampons through a letterbox. That was the problem I was trying to solve. So I came at this so naive and so unaware of what it is to live that female experience. And it's not just how do you put in a tampon. It's not just how do you speak to your mum about it. It's like it infiltrates every single aspect. And once you sort of see it, you can't unsee it. And being a purveyor of period products, it's you're on the coalface every day, and to put it in its most sort of direct example of this is, I would run our Facebook account when Facebook pages were very much sort of what it was when you started, and I'd have teenage girls messaged on there saying, I've just experienced spotting in my pants. What do I do about it? I can't tell my mum because she doesn't like having these conversations. Or I'm living with my grandmother and I don't know, or I haven't had this conversation until I need help. So you very, very rapidly become immersed in the world of what it is to be a girl starting, or a mother who might have sensitivities, or so. Yes, it was initially trying to fit a certain amount of period products through someone's letterbox at the right time every day, every month without fail, and it was a logistical exercise, and rapidly became something much more existential.
So from engineer to advocate and empathetic person.
Yes, to social engineer, to to product engineer. But
that's quite a shift, though, because we're lucky on this podcast that our listener is an open-minded person who doesn't see gender and didn't make any assumptions about the voices at the end of the microphone. But there's often a caricature that the engineering approach is a male one. So whenever there's an emotional problem in the family, the man would go, let me just engineer the way out of this current problem. So again, it is interesting to look at that broadening from a product engineering solution to a more holistic view of the company and a mission in more of a societal context.
You're totally right. And I was literally having this conversation with my wife 2 nights ago about engineering problems and thinking you can fix things. When actually sometimes you just need to listen
Yes.
and correct.
Yeah. You sound like my therapist now. Ian, just listen and stop telling people what your answer is.
Yeah, no surprises who won that discussion. And it was a discussion. So, yes, there is a big switch, but I guess I go back to Simon Sinek, who talked about like the why of your business. And for us, there are so many like whys which are much more exciting and much bigger problems to solve than trying to put things through a letterbox. But ultimately, you are still solving problems. And as a business owner or you know someone who runs a startup, entrepreneur, I guess your skill set is right. How do I engage with the problem? And you know, you're out there to sort of try and fix. And fixing might not be engineering. Fixing might just be collaborating or engineering, and maybe sometimes accepting that you don't know what the answer is.
Yeah.
But you are prepared to give it a go and try and get people talking and interested in changing and ultimately you know buying into what you're trying to do. So I think it's you know so there's a passion is a key ingredient, you know, diverse ways of thinking, and problem solving, you know, has a much wider, I guess, scope than obviously just sort of engineering what other people are doing.
Yeah. So tell us a bit more about the products, because looking at your website, there's a sort of mix of, you know, tech and design where you're designing solutions, but also the materials. So maybe just quickly just tell us what it is you sell. So what do you have that's got a buy button on it? And then we'll talk a bit about the materials and innovations around your product.
So the first problem we tried to solve is the issue of tampons being filled with plastic. 70% of people in the UK use plastic applicators, which for men out there is like a sort of syringe or a shotgun cartridge kind of device that effectively loads a tampon into your body. And like I said earlier, millions of these things are flushed down loos, and there's a whole load of problems here. The first problem is that no one in Europe uses plastic applicators, only in the UK and the US. Why? Because the major players, in this case Procter and Gamble, launched at plastic applicators in these markets, and therefore
And
it was
in case the
created.
lawyers are listening, we celebrate that innovation of its time.
We absolutely celebrate the ease with which you can insert a tampon
But
using
nowadays,
these products. Yeah. But you know, there's people in Europe look at the UK and be like, why do you need to solve that problem? Because it's not a problem. And so, you know, habit change and culture is feeds into this as well. But to go back to the solution, we wanted to create something that would solve this problem of how do you help women insert a tampon without it having huge plastic, you know, waste impact. So very simply, we just made ours reusable. But making it reusable, there's a whole lot that comes with that. You've got to make it, if it's going to be in your handbag for 10 years, it's got to look really good. It's got to be durable. It's got to be super easy to clean. It's got to be really easy to use. It's got to be versatile. It's got to be able to fit lots of different sizes of tampon in it. So we spent, I mean, it was our first ever, you know, attempt to make anything. And I'd never designed a product in my life. I just maybe built a bird table in carpentry at school. So there was a lot of design, but ultimately it had to have all of those things. And we launched that on Kickstarter, which was a very crucial medium for us or vehicle for us to get this out into the world, because it allowed us to build a community, gauge interest, get minimum order quantities from.
And did you get sort of emails coming in saying, love what you're doing, I've looked at what you've done, and here's an improved CAD design, or if you do it this way, it might be better. How active were people chipping in to your version 1, or did you just get it right first time? I mean, what was the iterative angle as well as the funding and pre-market testing? Did you get people chipping in at all?
Again, very astute comment. You should definitely run a podcast, Ian, if you don't already.
I might try one, actually.
So I wish we had been more collaborative and done a much more open book approach and just said, this is the problem and we're trying to solve it. Can anyone help us? But you keep your cards very close to your chest because you don't want anyone else to run away with this secret. And now it turns out that there's about 5 different versions of what we've done and people have copied us. But to begin with, no, it was very closed book, and we didn't want to put anything out until we were happy with it, because then you couldn't patent it. Because if anyone knows or have seen your design, you can't then protect it. And maybe we shouldn't have protected it. Maybe we should have viewed it like, how periods should be, which is like this most democratic, or it should be a democratized product, and open source, and just said, this is kind of what we're thinking, who can chip in. But we didn't. And I think if we'd done that, we probably wouldn't have got investment. So,
it's the innovator's dilemma, isn't it?
There's an element of chasing the money, in every aspect. But we launched on Kickstarter, and it was my co-founder Celia who went through the sacrificial process of trying out some of the early prototypes. A lot of these things were probably closer to medieval torture instruments than they were actually like comfortable insertion devices. But we, through that process, my wife as well, got closer and closer to something that resembled a solution. But it couldn't just be a solution. It had to be actually an improvement on what's already out there. And it was very satisfying when 2 months ago I decided on a whim just to speak to all our applicator customers and just said, is this more comfortable than a cardboard applicator, which is the most sustainable disposable? And 87% of them said absolutely, it's far more. So hopefully we've actually done an improvement to what's already out there. So yeah, in terms of asking people, no, you just, we got it out there. And because it was a world first, that created an impact, and it caused digital ripples on the internet, which we are still feeling today.
Right.
Our SEO, our brand recognition, our authority in the eyes of Google is all huge because it got so much momentum in the press, all free. And, it certainly helped plant the flag of what Dame stands for. It stands for like better design, easy to use solutions, sustainability, and, durability. So we've tried to sort of transfer all of those qualities into every product that we make from then onwards.
So an inventor, innovator, when I speak to people who have a product invention background, the hard thing is stopping. So how have you stopped yourself extending into a million different products and, different areas where, there's inequity that needs to be solved? I mean, what's the balance between warrior for justice and improvement on the one hand and running a tight, sensible business on the other? Because, most businesses can't stop themselves bloating to add on branded extension products.
I'm always on the horns of that dilemma. I can't stop, and you're so right to recognize that is one of the great flaws of people who like creating things. And no doubt there'll be a lot of Adobe listeners right now who will also be, will know that problem. It didn't really stop. We went from that. But it's largely led by what our customers and our community are saying. So we launched the reusable applicator, and with it some organic cotton tampons. We then had lots of inquiries from our customers saying, this is great, you've done it for tampons, can you now do it for pads? So that kind of led our next move, and we designed reusable pads, which did get a patent. And they are, ultimately more comfortable and softer and more absorbing than what's out there. So that leads us a bit, but there is a point where we probably should have stopped and learned how to sell what we had already made better.
Right.
And my inclination was, a small percentage of people use tampons compared to pads. So pads will help expand our market base.
Interesting.
And then from there, you're then thinking, well, more people are starting to use pants and reusable pads. So, and we were sort of chasing a wider and wider market. A lot of people make the mistake that just because half the population use period products, it's going to be the easiest thing to sell.
But by definition, they're already using something.
Exactly. Yeah. So therefore, the appeal of what we did, lots of people use lots of different products. So it made sense for us to have a solution for the whole basket that they might buy. They can buy that basket from Dame. Because if you're the sort of mindset where you want to stop plastic waste, well, then you're probably the mindset, well, you want to do that across your entire life.
Yeah.
So that was kind of, our sort of vision was to create the range. And we've now done that. And I thought that I'd put down my pencil or ruler and not do any more sort of designing. But already we're about to launch, or we have launched this really cool 3D dispenser that you can put into public washrooms that dispense our products, made out of old strawberry punnets. So yes, it doesn't stop, and it's a constant battle is stop, consolidate what you've got, and like learn how to sell, and then regroup.
This is when you have to hire a really good focused sales team who can do that, allowing you to go off and keep innovating. Just as you were talking, the middle class alert alarm went off. Our listener can't see that, but we were talking about basket of products. The customer has already decided that she doesn't like plastic. And immediately you sort of think, well, hang on. If you look at the range of experience, the range of affluence or not, the people who are saying I'm a non-plastics first person tends to be a more affluent customer. So where do you fit in the whole spectrum of providing period products from the people who have nothing on the one hand, so they're totally underserved, through to people who are, able to pick any product they like and have the money to do that. So where does your product fit in terms of the market?
I'd like to say I'm very grateful that that's where the question went. When you said the middle class alarm went off, I was like, it's taken you a while to spot my ridiculously plummy accent. So it's a very good point. And ultimately, reusable products save you money.
But you need to have the money up front.
So, for example, our reusable pads over 5 years of their lifetime, you'll save about 80% of what you would have on disposables. But that upfront cost is obviously big. So there are, ways you can do it with Klarna, that kind of thing, which spread out the cost. But it's the level below that I think is more of a challenge, which is like period poverty, people who can't buy anything at all.
Yeah.
And that's not just in this country, that's globally.
In fact, it's shocking you didn't say the other way around, as in that's not just globally, it's also in this country. I mean, that's the real shock.
Yes.
In developed affluent nations, that we still have period poverty.
Well, there's period poverty in this country in that people have been exposed to period products, but they can't afford them all the time. But there are ways and means of getting them. But there is, which, yes, is shocking in itself, especially when you consider the cost of these, of these essential products. But globally, there are people out there who have never even been introduced to period products. And so they, use all sorts of things from soil to rags, literally straw. Yeah. So where do you begin? Because, you can't boil the ocean. So it's about picking, I guess, a small segment of society that you can help and not spreading ourselves too thin. We, as part of our B2B offering, our business dispensers, we've partnered with a charity called Bloody Good Period, who provide free period products to refugees who have come into this country who can't afford them. So very targeted, very amazing charity that's been around for a while. And what's good about that is that businesses have there are boxes that they need to tick. And so it makes it a bit of a win-win-win, where you're saying, right, your employees are going to be happier because they've got period products. The female workforce is going to feel valued and we also use the charity to then help build period policy in workplaces. And then we give a percentage of our profits of those, every refill in the dispensers, that goes towards period poverty. So it's kind of baked in to that whole model. So that's kind of, as far as like our resources are concerned, as much we can do. And it's a sort of pay as you go model. So we're not sort of, don't have anything that we can't sustain. And then we work with a great charity called Pilio, who do our carbon insetting in Pakistan. And we've just started with them. There's always products that won't be fit for sale because they've got sort of something wrong with the logo on it, or the packaging's not quite right. So we've give all of our products to them, and we've just given 3,000 pads and pants to them, and they've gone out to villages in Pakistan. It's a very, very measurable, small, discrete project where they can actually go to 5 villages, gather people around. And what's great about that is the learnings of what the questions they are when when they first use these things, because you're literally giving them somebody who's never seen anything before.
Start from scratch.
So, in the same way that a baby might pick up an iPod and instinctively start, doing things, Steve Jobs did a good job with the design. And if you give someone a pad who's never seen anything comparable, what happens to it, and to that whole process. And what's been amazing about that is not only obviously are we able to give hundreds of women the freedom and the liberty that you get with using period products, but we also get to see how they all speak to each other and the questions they ask. And amongst them, there are very much influencers, and it'll be some of the women in the group who get it very quickly and then start influencing all the others and doing it. So, it's a very worthwhile and valuable experience for us to learn.
Interesting. Well, look, speaking of learning and how progress happens quickly at times, the growth of the company, on the one hand, a Kickstarter innovator, but on the other hand, working with big companies. So you've done some material science work with Patagonia, which sounds very interesting. You got grant funding from the John Lewis Partnership Circular Fund, and I hope I didn't make this up by saying that your first retail channel was in Waitrose.
Yeah.
So these are all kind of plucky, motivated startup meets big co. So talk to me about how those interfaces have worked to help you get the business up and running. What's it like when you're a small company and you wander in and you're in front of, I don't know, the circular fund owners, or you're trying to get things into Waitrose? That's sort of, early stage versus big company.
It's terrifying because you've got everything to lose and they don't really. But I think we recognised very early on, and we had this brilliant person who worked for us at the time called Richard Johnson, who was our head of impact, and he was really good at going out and meeting people and talking. And I think the expression radical collaboration was always, or radical transparency was always thrown around, and recognized very early on that we have a value to them. It's not just one way. And how do we exploit that?
Mm-hmm.
And in the case of Finisterre, for example, they got in touch with us and said, we want to do something that improves access to the ocean for everyone. And as part of that, they wanted to have a range of sustainable period products, because ultimately...
Because you don't want to be swimming through them when water companies don't treat you properly.
Exactly. And period products are the 5th most common plastic found on UK beaches. So it was a big, big sort of thing. And in return, we said, well, look, we've got these dry bags which keep your products safe when if you've changed your pants or pads out on on the move, you can sort of roll the top. But the material that we're using is basically raw plastic, and they had recycled ones. So they gave us the secret ingredient to their pads, and we gave them I guess brand equity and product, and we co-branded something. And that was a great it was a valuable lesson in that you can actually bring something to the table, however small you are, as long as you're authentic. And if you've built a good moat around you and you're doing things for the right reason, you're not trying to retrofit stuff, then there is a value to what you're doing. And big businesses sometimes can't access that.
Yeah.
And so they rely on partnering with smaller, authentic brands in order to achieve those goals.
So you're like their purposeful DNA that they're rubbing up against.
Yeah, exactly. That's sort of,
Sorry, that sounded very... I didn't mean that to sound as cynical as it sounded. Just to stop myself there, because it wasn't meant cynically. That partnership can be very valuable.
Yeah, they're that sort of friend in the playground who's like really, does something, and then you just want to be sort of friends with them just because they can do that. And then the John Lewis one, they very sensibly threw out a grant. So they get, for all those pennies that you spend on plastic bags as part of that tax, they put all that money towards giving grants, which was a very good thing to hear, that's where all the money went.
Yes.
I always just assumed they pocketed it. But
John Lewis would never do that.
No. So they did a sort of, a process of people applying, and our challenge was the menstrual cup is like the holy grail of period products. It's the most economical by far. I mean, these things cost pennies to make.
Reusable.
Totally reusable, last 10 years, incredibly good, like health-wise for your body, doesn't, leak anything. Very sustainable. I mean, they are literally perfect, but barely anyone uses them. So less than 5% of the planet use them, and yet they would solve everything from period poverty to health issues.
Wow.
And we said to them, this is literally the most perfect product, but no one's using it. Can you fund our research into why, and then hopefully produce a product at the end of it that might push this a little bit further down the line?
Yeah.
And so we carried out some research, and there was two big things that were pointed out. The first is just habit change. Like, people putting cups inside them was just mind-blowing. People don't... It's just such a big... It's
counterintuitive.
Leap. Yeah, it's such a big leap. And if it goes badly, then it's like, right, this isn't for me, and they give up, and like, that's it. And so that was a big thing, is like, how do you facilitate that change? And the second thing was, once you've used them, all cups out there, you have to boil them in your kitchen. And the idea of boiling your menstrual cup in your kitchen, if you're in a flat share with someone else or like a family member, there's already enough that goes on in the kitchen in terms of arguments, whether people want to make that carbonara and there's a cup boiling in there. So I totally understand why that might have been putting people off. So we ended up doing a lot of research, made a load of video sort of guides, and we made the first self-sanitizing cup that doesn't need to be boiled. Wow. And the problem is we get a lot of our customers for that cup actually already use a cup, but it's just
they boil it. And next thing is a melted cup.
So it's kind of worked, but it hasn't. We're still, trying to break the back of that habit change is very difficult. So to answer your question, Big Co, there should be a lot more of it.
It sounds like these companies have also made an effort to create interfaces for collaboration and support. And I think that's another lesson, which is to look for the right way in to the big companies, rather than just knocking on the door and trying to sell into the stores. So that's interesting.
Well, going back to what we were saying earlier about, like, I wish we'd collaborated more on our first product. I think big businesses should ask for help more. And we should all ask for help more, because to get out of where we are as a planet, as people, it's going to require all of us working together. And so these very small windows where businesses open up and they say, right, we're going to do a grant for this, are just moments of collaboration in what could be a much less competitive and much more cohesive business environment. And we run these camps for girls who are sort of 16, 17, 18. And it's one of the big things that we try and talk to them about, is the power of saying, I don't know, and the power of asking for help, whether you're starting a business or, whether you run one already and looking for something else. Because there is and this is, again, is why you need more women in the workplace, and you need more women co-founders, because historically men have this sort of chest thumping approach to doing things of I'm going to get to the top.
Yeah.
And naturally, women are so much better at asking for help and talking about things. And so, I mean, it's all getting quite meta, but, we are helping, hopefully, to get them to think more about how to weaponize these skills that they've got. And hopefully the world will be a better place when we get to that great 50-50 point.
So in a way, you also brought us to an obvious question for both of us. So we've already identified ourselves as male. And even though we may have, we've also got mums, we have better halves as our wives, we both have daughters, that still doesn't qualify us to talk either of the lived experience of women or for them. So can I just ask, as you were setting up a company, admittedly with a female co-founder, but there you are, conspicuously male, walking in, asking for funding, talking about your ideas. Was your maleness a positive, a negative? Were people so enlightened they looked through gender and just saw the product? I'm just interested about those conversations a decade ago where you were a man looking at a taboo women's product in the pre-COVID age. So how did that feel? What the benefits, disadvantage? How do you reflect on that?
I mean, fortunately, things have changed a lot from then, and only for the better. But it was a very strange world, or it was a strange stage to walk out onto when you can see and feel very viscerally the difference between you and your co-founder when you go into certain meetings. And that might be talking to a warehouse manager who typically has been male, or facilities managers who run buildings who, typically have been male, investors, male again. And, this isn't the time to go into the patriarchy, but it's ultimately trying to dismantle that. And in order to do that, I think you've got to have someone behind the enemy lines, so to speak, and you've got to have men part of the conversation because men are the problem. So, but there's been a very sort of it's transformed from at the beginning. When male investors spoke to us, they'd either be sort of sniggering about periods because they were sort of, didn't want to talk about it. And they would have to be sort of slightly put back in their place, then and there, to them assuming that I did all the finances in the company, to, I mean, it was
man's job.
Yeah. And as I sort of said at the beginning, like, you see when you're at the sort of the face of this, you see it through the lens of being a woman. It's everywhere. I mean, it is literally everywhere, even from the way products are designed to the way, I mean, sport is played, to everything. And once you're led into this world and you see it, you just can't unsee it. And in some cases, it was so obvious, and yet it wasn't spoken about. And the moment I'm thinking in particular is we went on Dragon's Den. Nobody look it up, please. And we had the dragons all laughing about periods, and what's he called? Peter Jones was sort of asking some sort of slightly kind of childish comment. And there was this sort of awkward kind of thing where it's like, hang on a second, we're actually talking about something quite serious here and you're totally undermining it.
Yeah.
But you play along, right? Because they're the dragons and you're trying to sort of woo them over. And it gave me great pleasure to talk about vaginal discharge live on the BBC to Peter Jones, who just couldn't handle it. But then afterwards, I think it was maybe like an hour later on the planning schedule, there was a program about depression amongst teenage girls. And I wrote a letter to the BBC saying this is just such irresponsible broadcasting. Like, you cannot show grown men laughing about period products and periods and then show a program which just blatantly reveals why this is so important that this is spoken about. And actually the letter got far more of sort of traction and interest than what we got on Dragon's Den.
Interesting.
But, it was so obvious back then. It's a bit like when you watch 90s sitcoms now. And you're like, how are they getting
just
away
been
with that
cancelled,
now?
yes. Retrospectively cancelled.
Yeah. So, it's been a very exciting 10 years to be on this. And we started with like fighting tampon tax, and I'd write articles and papers about it. And, when you look at sort of how luxury yachts weren't taxed or whatever it was, I can't quite remember. And then period products were, that's another example of just how mad it is, how these things sit alongside each other. So, yeah, it's been a great time to be in it. It's been great to be part of that change, and actually trying to get policy and tax removed and that kind of thing. And I guess it's why I love what I do.
So let's look forward another 10 years. I know that's difficult to imagine, but as we leave the studio, you're not short of ideas. Progress has been made, but around every corner there are more things to be sorted out, more paths to follow. What's on your mind? What's next for Dame, in between the enormous amount you could do with also focusing? What's exciting you about what comes after the podcast? Hopefully no letters from Peter Jones's lawyers.
I think we're at a crossroads of very exciting zeitgeisty conversations that are happening, and every one could be an entire career in itself. For us, for me, it probably is much more commercial. The answer is we've been in sort of startup mode, burning through cash for a long time, and we've been on a big path to profitability, and we're now there, and it means that I don't have to go out and fundraise anymore.
Wow.
For the moment. And I think continuing on that deep commercial focus for now, the environment's changed. Investors aren't quite as willing to throw in. The D2C sort of bug has slightly sort of worn off. And actually, I think there's something very attractive about a business that can stand on its own 2 feet.
Yeah.
So that's really like a big priority. How we do that, well, it requires a lot of sort of creativity still. It's how do you find people for as cheaply as possible and persuade them to do what you're selling, to buy what you're selling. And one of the things that we're doing at the moment, which launches tomorrow, which I'm really excited about, is a partnership with Girl Guiding. And their slogan is, "We believe any girl can do anything." And I just love that. It's everything that we're about. And so that launches tomorrow, and with it, we're going to sort of do effectively a kind of product launch, and support the 250,000 parents who have teenagers out there, and do some sort of co-educational, basically building and writing of resources. So those are the sort of things that will help us get to where we need to be.
So it doesn't sound like there's much of a let-up then. It's not the next 10 years I'll be coasting.
I think, no, I don't think coasting. I just think there's so much that still needs to be done. And as long as there's still crap products being made and sold in crap ways, then we have a purpose.
Well, that's a mission statement to add to your other ones. Alec, time has defeated us, and I'm only a fraction of the way through our notes, so we're going to have to get you back maybe later in the year when we're talking about purposeful businesses, B Corps and so on, because we didn't even get anywhere near that. But I hope our listener has enjoyed and been as inspired as I've been with what you've done. It's been an absolute positive revelation, and what a lovely way to get back to the studio and hear the story. Alec, thank you so much.
Thank you.